Ho, ho, ho. Or as they say in A Song of Ice and Fire, I know, oh, oh, oh. That's right. There is a link between Patchface's oh, oh, oh and Santa's ho, ho, ho. And I'll explain that and many other things having to do with Christmas mythology today. So welcome, friends, to the King of Winter Christmas Mythology live stream. It's going to be a fun one today. Yes, I've been binging Christmas videos just to sort of refresh my memory and stuff. But of course, I did a ton of this research for the Green Zombies series, which I've also been brushing up on. And oh man, these Party City antlers are like at least 4 Halloweens ago, and they're getting a little worn out. Luckily, I bought like 4 extra sets, so I just need to get a new set, slash some holes in it, put it on the headband. But in any case, we are here to talk about deer, antlers, green men, reindeer, Santa, mushrooms, Jack Frost, Jon Snow, Robb Stark, all of that stuff, and yes, Patchface. So we're going to have a fun stream today. But first, in case you don't follow me on social media, I would like to share a bit of good news, friends. That's right. Get ready to get embarrassed, Minty Maelstrom. Some of you guys know Minty from the chat is my real life girlfriend. Now my real life fiance. That's right. I popped the questions. She said, yes, we're engaged. Everyone be happy for me. It was vaguely related. I used the way that I snuck in the proposal. I won't tell the whole story, but I did use, I put the beginning of the proposal. I hid it inside of the video that I was working on. And I did a little animation where my comet head flew by and dropped the ring box onto my shelf. And then real life me, yeah, okay, these are done. Turned around and picked it up and got on my knee and did the proposal. So thanks, guys, for the congratulations in the chat. I do appreciate that. Yes, we're very happy. I'm on cloud 9, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So thanks, guys. Yeah. Some of you have noticed I've been looking a little more joyful, healthy, less bedraggled lately. That Minty does get the credit for that, so be happy for me. It's yeah, so we try to be cute. We're on Instagram. I'm on Instagram if you want to follow me there at David Lightbringer. So in any case, Christmas time is here, so I of course will have to read a little bit of Jethro Tull lyrics. Let's see, which one was this now? This would be Jack in the Green. Yes. Dad raised me on Jethro Tull and other prog rock. And my first musical influence, quite an occult fellow, Ian Anderson. So have you seen the Jack in the Green with his long tail hanging down? He sits quietly under every tree in the folds of his velvet gown. He drinks from the empty acorn cup, the dew that dawn sweetly bestows, and taps his cane upon the ground, signals the snowdrops it's time to grow. It's no fun being Jack in the Green, no place to dance, no time for song. He wears the colors of the summer soldier and carries the green flag all winter long. Jack, do you never sleep? Does the green still run deep in your heart? Or will these changing times, motorways, power lines keep us apart? Well, I don't think so. I saw some green grass growing through the pavements today. The rowan, the oak, and the holly tree are the charges left for him to groom. Each blade of grass whispers, Jack in the Green. Oh, Jack, please help me through my winter's night. And we are the berries on the holly tree. Oh, the missel thrush is coming. Jack, put out the light. So Jack in the Green is one of many Christmas mythologies that George Martin is using. The Jack in the Green symbolism is essentially the glass gardens of Winterfell. I made that comparison because the Jack in the Green character is essentially someone who preserves the green through the winter so that in the spring there are seeds to grow again. So if the Green Man or the horned god Cernunnos is generally exemplifying the vitality of nature. That's why he's a green man made of shoots and stuff like that. And I've got some Green Man art to share with you guys Jack in the Green, he exemplifies the green that you don't see in the winter. The green, it's not there, but you know it's coming back. So he's hiding somewhere. He's in the folds of the wood. He's drinking from his acorn cup, but he's ready to help the green return in the spring. So that's yeah, Jake and Green. That's cool. Very good. So yeah, that's a good one. And there's several Jacks on the Night's Watch. Of course, in the Green Zombie series, I went through the Night's Watch names and showed how many of them are alluding to various Green Man myths. John Barley, there's a Barleycorn guy on there, and there's a few others. So let's see if my tea is cooled down yet. He's the ghost of Christmas present. Okay, so one thing about A Christmas Carol and the three ghosts that visit Ebenezer Scrooge is that Christmas time, or at least the winter solstice or the winter holiday, was regarded as a time where the veil is thin, much like Halloween or All Hallows Eve, which we've kind of, well, I won't say we, but I found that a lot of the ideas associated with the original winter festivals have been sort of split out. New Year's, the idea of a feast and a sacrificial animal, which we in America have adapted for Thanksgiving. These are all actually really have origins in the winter holiday and Christmas holiday. So a lot of versions of winter folklore will have ghosts and spirits. Okay. And so, and in fact, if you go back to Norse mythology, and basically just to let's do this. We're going to be talking primarily about Germanic mythology, from which Norse mythology grows, as well as Celtic mythology or Irish mythology. They are different, but they both come from Proto-Indo-European, so they do have a lot of things in common. And then, of course, the Germanic and Celtic peoples were butting up against each other in Europe and later in England. And so a lot of the mythology has mixed up. But we will be mostly drawing, when I say European folklore, really means Proto-Germanic and Norse folklore. And then you also have, when you go even into like Eastern Europe and Russia, you're going to find very similar mythology, because that too is coming from a certain branch of Proto-Indo-European called the Yamnaya, who are basically a horse culture people. So what we're going to see is basically there's a lot of shamanic ideas that we've explored through Odin that we're going to find spread all through Christmas mythology, all the way from, I guess you'd say, England and Northern Europe, all the way over to Russia and Eastern Europe in the middle. We're going to see a lot of stuff. Everybody has a Father Christmas figure. In Russia, he looks a little different, but it's still an old man with a white beard, red and white, coloring and all that stuff. So really what I've found studying all the stuff, and I did some Fortress of Lug and a couple other videos that I see if I can grab the link and share with you guys. But really it's most of this is about nature mythology and shamanism. And shamanism, of course, is really a catch-all term. It's a Russian term in particular, but it's really a catch-all term for the people in, ancient tribal hunter-gatherer society who acted as liaisons between the spirit world and the physical world. And this had a lot to do with how man perceived nature. So the idea of nature mythology and shamanistic ideas kind of really are zipped up all together. So, for example, first thing I will share with you, we can talk about the Great Hunt. Of course, Santa rides through the sky in a kind of chariot pulled by reindeer who fly. And I'm going to share a little art with you here. Now, of course, some of the reindeer names are interesting. Donner and Blitzen are just words for thunder and lightning. And of course, another one is named Comet. So thunder, lightning, comets, these are things you'd expect to find in the sky. But the Wild Hunt is one of the oldest myths that we're going to find behind a lot of this Christmas mythology. And the Wild Hunt has to do with this idea that, like I was saying, Christmas is a time when the veil is thin. So the Wild Hunt is essentially a convoy, a party of dead spirits who have returned to the earth, and they are roaming around and hunting things. Usually it's hunting a magical animal. The thing about the Wild Hunt is that they will scoop you up if they see you. So when they come by, you have to get on the ground and don't look at them, or else you'll get pulled into the Wild Hunt and you'll have to go with them. Now, the Wild Hunt sometimes flies in the sky, but this is really a shamanic idea when it flies. And reindeer, as it turns out, are heavily associated with shamans and psychedelic mushrooms in particular. So Santa, of course, if I can just switch hats for a second. Santa, he wears red and white, as we all know. And red and white are well known as the colors. Hold on, let me get this straight here. Of the Amanita muscaria mushroom, which is one of the first psychedelic mushrooms that mankind was using, and shamans in particular. So, as you know, these mushrooms are red and white. That is, I think, the main reason why the weirwoods are red and white. We've talked many times about how the mushrooms are essentially, not the mushrooms, the weirwoods are like a mushroom, and that most of them exist underground, and the trees that we see are more like the mushroom caps popping up above the ground. And indeed, they look just like Amanitas mushroom caps. Obviously, the weirwood trees are used for psychedelic astral projection, which is essentially shamanism. And that's what the mushrooms are used for. Now, the Amanitas mushrooms, they are, first of all, found beneath pine trees very commonly, which is apparently the origin of placing brightly colored gifts beneath the Christmas tree. Those represent mushrooms growing under a pine tree. And in fact, the psychedelic mushrooms were given by shamans to people at the winter solstice as gifts. That's part of the origin of the gift giving. The mushrooms were typically dried. They're poisonous, so you have to dry them out. They were dried on the tree branches. So now we have the idea of the Christmas ornaments, the brightly colored ornaments on the tree. Well, those are dried out mushrooms originally. So it's all about tripping, as are the weirwoods. And there's an interesting article that I read from psychedelicspotlight.com called Santa Claus Was a Psychedelic Mushroom. And if somebody, actually, I'll pull it up because it's got some funny art that I want to share with you guys. Here we go. I will share this link with you. And this live stream is going to bounce all around. I am going to constantly be tying it back to A Song of Ice and Fire, but I am going to be bouncing around. If you would like to call out some particular winter or Christmas mythology you want to see us talk about, PayPal.me, Mythical Astronomy, or the super chat function is the way to go. So thank you, folks. And I saw a couple of PayPals just roll in. I think those might have been congratulations on getting engaged, possibly. Got a couple of Christmas PayPals also in the last couple of days. So thanks if you sent one of those in. And so okay. This article, that's right. My ADD feels like it's pretty bad today. So this might be, I might be bouncing all over the place as far as the topics go, but it'll all be related and happy. So let me share this. I'm going to share the picture of the article because it's got some good art in it. Some mushroom Santa art that I want you guys to see. There we go. So here you can see the idea of gnomes and elves being associated with mushrooms that's got its own independent roots. So the idea of Santa having elves, that's another one. That's another clue that this mythology is tied into mushroom mythology. And there's a little elf carrying a mushroom around. And so here we see a mushroom house and Santa's living inside it. So now the reindeer, by the way, they like to seek out the psychedelic Amanita mushroom and eat them, to the point where, this is a little gross, people would drink the reindeer piss because it would have the psychedelic properties of the mushroom still in them. So yeah, there's that. But the point is that reindeer are heavily associated with shamanism for a couple of reasons. One, they eat mushrooms, and two, the idea of the horns is, of course, a big part of the shamanistic tradition. So you've got this horned animal that eats mushrooms. And the shamans, basically, I guess the way to say it is that when they journeyed into the spirit world, they were seeing as their physical self dying and their spirit self sort of merging with various spirit animal avatars. And that was sort of how they surfed the great unknown, if you will. So shamans are a preferred animal. I mean, reindeer, preferred animal for shamans for those reasons. And there's a little more, like I said, in this article, if you want the full story there. Happy little mushrooms. Happy little gnomes. All right. So let me put myself back on here. Put my regular hat back on. And looks like I'm gonna have to go get Cleo. She's feeling left out as usual. Let me give you some different art to look at. I just mentioned the Green Man, so let's go ahead and do that. That Green Man is by PMA Carlson Designs. This is a photo by Matt Davies of an actual Green Man. And here we go. This is from Mark T3000. This is a very Christmas looking Green Man, and I'll explain the connection in just a second. I think this is where I make a joke about me being lit up like a Christmas tree. Lit up like an old Christmas tree. Bow, 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 bow. Primus, shout out for those of you who know Primus. So yes, the Green Man. Hold on, before I go into the Green Man. Well, so, and you can see the mushrooms here at the bottom of the tree, actually. So this is a great, I picked the right art, and I'll zoom in a bit here. There, you can see the mushrooms at the bottom of the tree. So this artist knows his folklore. Yes. So let's just take what I've just talked about and tie it back into a song of ice and fire. So obviously, like I said, the weirwoods are colored like the Amanita mushrooms. They give way to psychedelic shamanic experiences. And the weirwood organism seems to be like a mushroom in that most of it is underground. Then we see Bloodraven in the cave. He's got mushrooms on his face. So George is telling us over and over and over again, he's using the mushroom mythology with the weirwoods. That's pretty straightforward. But now getting back to Santa being tied to that same red and white mushroom, hence his coloring. Well, you could see what Santa starts becoming. He's the mushroom man. He's the guy that comes. He's the wise man with the beard who comes around and gives you mushrooms. And also he flies with the magic reindeer, he visits everybody in a single night, but no one actually sees him. So you can see how many of these ideas come from shamanism. Even the chimney, going up and down the chimney, that comes from deep Russian winter, and Eastern European winter, where the doors would be snowed in, and people would have entrances on the roofs of their houses to go in and out. So when the sometimes when the shamans would come around and give the mushroom gifts at winter, they would be going down the ceiling hatch because everyone's snowed in. So there's a lot of it right there. So yeah, Blood Raven and the Children of the Forest. Exactly. That's why we see the Children of the Forest hanging around the weirwoods and serving up the quote unquote weirwood paste. It's very, very Santa and the elves. Yeah, and even Blood Raven with the long beard. His sigil is white, red, and gray. So he's got the red and white coloring. His entire body is red and white, obviously being an albino with the red eyes. So yeah, it's all right there. Then we've got let's see, where do I want to go from here? I've got a swirling mass of Christmas mythology in my head here. Okay, so we've got these weirwoods, we've got the Children of the Forest, we've got all the mushroom symbolism, right? Well, then we've got the Starks, and the Starks are called the Kings of Winter, and that's the title of the stream. The King of Winter mythology is a branch of Green Man mythology. Well, it's a branch of Wicker Man mythology, which is a branch of Green Man mythology. So let's peel back those layers, and that will take us through a lot of the Christmas myth, and it will end up with explaining why the Starks are called the Kings of Winter and why they, always seen under the weirwood tree, cleaning their swords and things like that. So first of all, the Green Man, and we can go through this quick because the Green Man is basic stuff. If you've ever watched this channel, you kind of know what's up with the Green Man. But the basic concept, and this is by Peter Williams, this artwork here, is that the Green Man represents nature. It represents the vitality of nature, the springiness of spring, the thing that makes everything grow. The Green Man is always associated with the sun because, of course, the sun makes plants grow. So the Green Man, not only does he represent nature, he also is associated with ideas like male virility. Okay. So the idea of the untamable stag energy, the wild stag, the Green Man is associated with, the wild man of the woods is sort of a side branch. And when I say Green Man, it really is an umbrella term. It's a little more specific than Corn King, which deals with any sort of resurrected fertility god. But the Green Man mythology basically refers to any sort of green nature deity who represents nature. And there are many, many, many permutations. So the other thing, of course, as with all folklore, it's usually impossible to get back to any sort of pure origins of anything. Ideas get traded around, and we don't have written records. Like, we see pictures of the antlered man on the Gundestrup cauldron, which most people take to be Cernunnos or Cernunnos, as it turns out. Hard K, hard C rather. That's right. I've been saying it wrong this whole time. Although not wrong. I guess both pronunciations are acceptable. But the hardcore European folk will say Cernunnos, as it turns out. Like Corn King, or even Hern the Hunter, the Cernunnos, Hern, it's the same root word there. So the Green Man represents nature. He always dies in the fall or the winter, right? Just as the plants lose their green, and then he's reborn in the spring, oftentimes resurrected by the great goddess, the nature goddess, the triple goddess, the earth goddess, various versions of that idea. So just as, and a lot of times the goddess part of the cycle, of course, women are associated with primarily with birth and rebirth in mythology. That's going to be the first association for any goddess. And so when the virility dies, like the winter months, you can liken that to the womb. Or if you think about Kali, remember the tomb and the womb, space, the unknown, these ideas are all associated with the feminine, with the divine feminine. And it is from that void that everything is reborn. So you could think of wintertime as representing the tomb and the womb from which spring is reborn. And so that's why the triple goddess or some sort of goddess will usually resurrect the green man or the horned god. So sometimes what we will find is that the green man is split into the oak and holly king. Now, the oak and holly king idea is really a newer idea. It's associated mostly with what you'd call neo-paganism. And let's see, do I have an oak and holly king one? No, I just have green man up here. So these first two would be very much like the oak king, whereas this fella here is closer to a holly king figure. And of course, the holly king is where Santa Claus comes from. Of course, we know that. But the whole idea with the oak and the holly king is that it represents this cycle of winter and summer. Or if you prefer, you can think about specifically the sun and the length of the days. The summer solstice is the longest day, right? That is when the sun shines the most. The day is much longer than the night. We just passed the winter solstice. That was the shortest day and the longest night, which of course is where the idea of the long night comes from. So on the winter solstice, this is the day when the sun begins gaining strength again. So many people would see the sun as being reborn on the winter solstice. It's reached its lowest point. Now it's growing again. It was dying. It was shrinking. The days were shrinking. They were getting shorter. Now they're growing longer again. So this is the rebirth of the sun. The oak and the holly king, you can essentially think about the bright sun as being represented by the oak king. He represents summer, the green vitality. This is your Robert Baratheon, if you want to use the Ned and Robert dichotomy at Winterfell, where George is giving us very strong oak and holly king vibes. Oak king represents bounty. So you remember in that first chapter, Robert comes up talking about how ripe everything is in the South and how the women are voluptuous and scantily clad and the fruits are tasty and the wine is good and everyone's fat and drunk and rich. This is all excess bounty of summer. It represents vitality in life. But then the holly king represents the winter months. So this is the opposite. It's the waning. It's the dying off of nature. It's the quiet, cold months. But again, that is where everything is reborn from. I got some Bessie's Teats talk floating around in the chat. It's always good. So yeah, actually, we'll go ahead and we'll roll stag here for just a minute. All right. So that's the oak and the holly king, basically the summer and the winter king is how you can think of it. And they are depicted as brothers who are engaged in a never-ending struggle. They kill each other, right? The oak king is killed at midsummer because that is when the days begin to shrink again. And then the holly king is going to be killed at the winter solstice so that the oak king can be reborn and the days can grow longer again. Now, some versions of this mythology shift those dates around to the equinoxes, which actually kind of makes more sense. So you'd have the summer king dying in the fall and the oak king dying in the spring, or the winter king dying in the spring. So you could say that the winter solstice, the shortest day, that's when the winter god is at the strongest. You could perceive it that way. But either construction still perceives the same idea, just with a little variation. This is the turning of the seasons. It's the thing that governs all of life. If you have to farm, if you're living in the elements and you have to take shelter, like if you live in the Bay Area inside a air-conditioned and heated apartment like me, you could barely notice the seasons. But If you're living outside, you notice him a lot more, of course. And a lot of this has to do with the advent of farming as well, a lot of this mythology. So from the Holly King side of things comes all of our Winter King ideas. And I'll put this guy back up for a second. The Holly King is there's different ideas with him. So he's going to be a lot of times older and emaciated. He's, if you, like I said, if Robert represents the Summer King or the Oak King, it's the Starks who represent the Winter King, the King of Winter. The Starks are notoriously humorless. They're long and kind of gaunt, like the wolves that they pal around with. Wolves being a predatory winter animal. So it's all of a piece when we see Robert and Ned talking. And when they go into the crypts, it's really, really heavy. Like Robert is laughing and he's boisterous and he's making jokes. And Ned is sitting there thinking all these very serious, somber thoughts. And the kings of winter around him, all the statues, it's written over and over again about how they don't think anything is funny. They are very stern. Robert's laughter echoes, rattles through the hallway. And so you have this boisterous Summer King going down there, and he's asking Ned why he doesn't laugh. And he's like, well, the laughter freezes in our throats up here in the north, is a line. So you have these winter people who are, again, kind of gaunt. They represent the winter months. Now, when we see the dire wolf in the snow that has the antler through its throat, and we can see the wolf and the stag have killed each other, that is a perfect depiction of the A Song of Ice and Fire version of the Oak and the Holly King. The wolf representing the Starks and Winter, and the stag representing the Baratheons and the Summer Kings. And so they have killed each other. That is the cycle of the seasons, because like I said, the Oak and the Holly King are in a constant struggle where one is taking supremacy for 6 months and then the other's defeating them and reigning for another 6 months. Let me just flip over to my email. I got a couple of PayPals coming in. Thank you, Maud Mary. Very generous. Thank you. And from Nathan, enjoyed the Jethro Tull shout out, the engagement announcement, and Roland Kirk. I'm not sure who that is. I'll have to look that up. Thank you, Nathan. Yeah, so I do see a connection with the laughter or the lack of laughter and Cold Hands, who has the Cold Hands. His throat's been cut and his voice rattles. Robert's laugh is rattling through the crypts as well. And of course, Cold Hands is essentially like a dead green man. And we're going to talk about her and the Hunter in a little bit. But let's drill down into the King of Winter. So just with the raw idea of any kind of Winter King or King of Winter, makes sense to see the Starks called the Kings of Winter when they reign in the north, and they're gathered around this Amanita muscaria tree, the weirwood tree, which calls out both to, like I said, all the Santa Claus mythology, as well as Yggdrasil and Odin. Now, Odin, let's do the Odin part. That fits in well here. So Odin is known as the Yule Father. And of course, Yule is sometimes known as another name for Christmas or the winter holiday. Now, the origins of the word Yule are debated. There's a couple of different ideas about it. But one idea is possibly that it shares the same root word as wheel, as in the wheel of the year. And there's many gods that are associated with wooden wheels that are associated with the cycles of the seasons. So this kind of makes sense. But in any case, Odin is called the Yule Father. He contributes a lot to Christmas mythology. Odin leads the wild hunt, just like essentially Santa Claus is flying through the sky with his reindeer. Odin leads the wild hunt as well. Now, all the shamanic ideas that we just talked about obviously are present in Odin. We've talked about that extensively in the Odin Origin series. The drums, like Odin's always riding a horse, right? Well, Santa rides the reindeer, but many versions of Santa do ride a horse, like Father Christmas or Sinterklaas from the Netherlands. They're going to ride a white horse, more like Odin riding Sleipnir, who's either a gray horse, a pale horse, or a white horse. So Odin, of course, we know that all these horses that Odin is riding, whether it's Sleipnir, the eight-legged horse who can fly, so that's very similar to the flying reindeer, or the tree itself, Yggdrasil, which is Odin's horse. The idea of the horse is really the idea of the shamanic drumming, right? This is one of the cooler finds that I've come across doing the Green Seer research. The shamanic, when shamans would attempt to pierce the veil and go into a trance, frequently would be associated with chanting and drumming. And the drumming was perceived as the hoofbeats of an invisible horse that the shaman rides into the astral realm. And George is using this idea real heavily. One of my favorite versions is when Theon is in the Godswood of Winterfell and Bran is whispering his name, and in the background are the drums, boom, doom, from Moore's Crowfood Umber. So you have this beating drum like a heartbeat as Theon is interacting with the Weirwood tree and hearing Bran's voice. There's a few other scenes. If you look up any of the scenes with the boom, doom drums, you'll see Green Seer symbolism happening. The Red Wedding, John's Dream, the Battle of the Blackwater. Check out the Weirwood Compendium for that. But that's where the shamanic horse riding comes from. It comes from the drumming. So all these Father Christmas, a lot of these, like I said, these I forget the names of the various Russian and Eastern European versions of it, but it's as soon as you see the picture, you recognize the guy. Like I said, Sinterklaas is one, and there's various other names. But she's always going to be riding a horse or leading a wild hunt, and that's all shamanic stuff. So Odin, the god of shamanism and the Yule father, basically the winter holiday is his holiday. Now, Yule is also a name that is worked into the names of the months of January and December in Norse language. And basically it means before Yule and after Yule. And that was essentially Odin's holiday. Now, if we think about Odin being associated with the winter, it's also going to lead us to talk of Ragnarok, which is, of course, the last battle. But the Ragnarok is... the beginning of it is the Thimble winter. It is the forever winter, the long winter, or the long night. So it says that 3 winters fall in a row, and then Skoll and Hati eat the sun and moon, and the stars are swallowed up as well. So then that is essentially, we know the Ragnarok is probably the primary influence for George's long night. It begins with a long winter and darkness. That's essentially the backdrop of Ragnarok, and then all the destruction happens on top of that. So Odin, of course, he leads a host of the undead warriors of Valhalla into the fight of Ragnarok. Now Odin dies during Ragnarok. He's eaten by Fenrir, and then his son Vidar kills Fenrir. But the point is that Odin spends almost all of his whole life preparing and thinking about Ragnarok, which is the long winter. So whether it's the months themselves or Ragnarok, we see this idea that Odin is the Yule father, and he's associated with every kind of winter and darkness in Norse mythology. So hence, again, you see Bloodraven is almost he's like 70% Odin. So you can see the crossover between Odin, Father Christmas, and Bloodraven. Bloodraven he's got specific nods to both Odin and Christmas mythology, and that's because they're really all connected when you sort of get behind it there. Isn't that right, Cleo? So you've got the Starks. They're kings of the North, kings of winter, and they're hanging out by this shamanic mushroom tree. And occasionally they might be becoming green seers and skin changers and things like that. Now, the King of Winter, turns out, is not just a generic title about a winter king, but also a specific reference to the Wicker Man. And I'll share my Wicker Man art here. There we are. That's Bran being carried around in a wicker basket. That's important, but I'll talk about that in a second. So the Wicker Man, it's a movie from the 70s. It is Celtic folklore, Germanic folklore. We see versions of it in both. And essentially the idea is, and we don't even know if this is true, but the idea is that people would build a large wooden frame and then put captives inside of it and burn the thing. What we know is true is that large wooden effigies of oak kings, green men, and the like are often burned in the winter or the spring. And of course, if you're thinking of the Burning Man festival, similar idea. So this is Julius Caesar is the main source for the idea of druidic human sacrifice via Wicker Man. We don't know if the human sacrifice was part of the Wicker Man ritual. We do know human sacrifice was practiced by Germanic peoples and Celtic peoples. So it is possible. And here's a little close-up. You can see poor people being shoved into the Wicker Man. There's must be like 100 people in there. And if you watched Sabrina, the most recent Sabrina TV show, they did a cool Green Man, Wicker Man plot line in one of the seasons that I recall. And then this is from the movie The Wicker Man, 1973, which I still haven't watched, by the way. See, the idea of a Wicker Man, essentially, is that he's a dead green man. What you would do is, in the fall, you would take the dead shoots from the harvest, the leftover stalks and things that you've taken the corn off of it or whatever, and then you make this Wicker Man, and then he's usually kept through the winter, and he's burned in the spring, a lot of times at Beltane. And it's a piece of the harvest. The King of Winter is a specific version of the Wicker Man. The King of Winter tradition, basically you'd make a small one, maybe like 3 feet tall, out of, again, your leftover harvest shoots and things, and you'd keep them all through the winter, and then in the spring you'd burn them at Beltane. And the idea is that it's kind of like the Jack in the Green. It's a piece of the harvest that has made its way through the winter, and it's lighting the fire of the new year. Something along those lines. So it's pretty simple, but think about that. The King of Winter is a dead green man who lights on fire to bring the spring. So now think about Jon Snow. He's a dead skin changer who's going to probably be resurrected with fire to help bring the spring, right? I mean, it's a very close correlation in ideas there. And then again, the Starks are called the Kings of Winter. They have all this death symbolism. They've got the underworld Lord of the Dead symbolism. They've got a ton of Green Man symbolism, meaning skin changer and green seer symbolism. And then they're associated with this idea of the King of Winter, a dead green man who survives through the winter and catches on fire in the spring. Now, George has actually gone further to associate the whites with the Wicker Man, because every time a white is caught on fire, we see that they are highly flammable and they go up like straw, like kindling, like old dry wood, or like parchment. Those are the words that George uses to describe the whites when they burn. So now we think of not only the burning whites, but those scarecrow sentinels, right? Remember, we just did the Melisandre series, and I was talking all about the fire whites and how the scarecrow sentinels are foreshadowing for a bunch of fire whites manning the wall with Jon Snow, right? There you go. Well, those fire whites, not only are they burning scarecrows, just as Beric is a burning scarecrow, the fire whites really are Wicker men. And let me see some Cleo emojis in the chat from my squishers, my channel members who have access to all my cool emojis like Cleo. So yeah, those scarecrow sentinels, they're already associated with Beric because they're called scarecrow knights and they're caught on fire. And Beric is the scarecrow knight. And he, of course, is burning with R'hllor's fire. But when we consider that the King of Winter is a Wicker man, then we look at those scarecrow sentinels again and we see, oh, well, those are Wicker men who have caught on fire. So they're basically like a whole bunch of kings of winter. They're straw men being kept through the winter and then set on fire to help bring the spring. So it's like, whoa, bro. Whoa, dude. The Fire Whites, the Starks, the Night's Watch, they're all tied into the same mythology. And again, it's Green Man mythology, specifically associated with bringing the spring, which is the entire problem with the Song of Ice and Fire. How do we end the long night? We have to fight the others. Well, the King of Winter is the right guy to do it. And then the idea that it's, like I said, it's made of dead shoots and dead branches and things also lines up with the green zombie theory, which we see with Cold Hands, of course. The idea of an actually undead Night's Watch Ranger. So Cold Hands, he's a cold white. He's just as flammable as the other cold whites. And yet, he's a Night's Watch Ranger, riding around on an elk like the Green Men. So George is implying him as a Green Man by putting him on the elk and giving him essentially skin changer powers. But he's a dead Green Man. So that's very much like the King of Winter as well. And it's even more similar to our good friend Herne the Hunter. It will be our next thing that I will share. Let me grab a lozenge. 1 second, guys. Gaze upon Herne. Let me blow it up just a little. There we go. So Herne the Hunter, he's the undead leader of the Wild Hunt, essentially. But yeah, 1 second. All right, so Herne the Hunter. Herne the Hunter is, well, he is Cold Hands. The story of Herne the Hunter is that his story begins off as he's some sort of disgraced individual. He's committed some sort of crime, and he's hung on an oak tree. And it's actually a specific oak tree called Herne's Oak that exists somewhere in England. But it's basically just the idea of a mythical tree. He's hung on the tree. So already we can see this is a version of the mythology that gave rise to Odin. Odin, of course, was hung on Yggdrasil, his tree, and he defeats death after 9 days and sees the runes. By the way, when Odin spies the runes, he then gives the runes to humanity, and the runes are a magical language which enables magical power. So Odin, he's doing the Santa gift giving thing. That's part of the gift giving. Remember, I said the shamans in Russia and other places like that would give out the Amanitas mushrooms at winter solstice. Well, that Odin's version of that is that he hangs on the tree and then gives people the runes. And in some Scandinavian countries, one of the things they do for their winter festival is they give little cookies with letters on them, and that you get a cookie with the letter of your first name, because of course runes are often used for names, and names have tremendous power. So essentially, when you're being given a letter cookie, you're being given a rune, and that tradition comes from Odin. So Herne the Hunter, like Odin, he starts off being hung on a tree. Hanged. Yeah, Odin was hung, guys. He's hung. Let me get my hung Odin artwork. Hang on a second. I have it. Most Odin artwork gives us an old man. However, Adam Wazierski has drawn hung Odin, if you will. Let me just hang on. It's Christmas. We're having fun, right? Go Vikings. They lost today. That's okay. They suck. Here we go. Hung Odin. Sexy Odin. This is a great one too, because it puts him in a tree throne, not unlike a weirwood throne. And you've got his wolves there. So you can really just see how much Stark and Green Sea or Skin Changer mythology comes from Odin. And of course, check out the Odin Origins series, which is in a playlist right on my YouTube channel for the for all the detail on that. Yeah, this is a snack Odin, hunk Odin. Yes, that's him. But let me go back to Herne the Hunter. Herne the Hunter is less sexy because he is dead. He does not come back to life fully. He's more like Cold Hands, like I was saying. He's dead, or he's just a ghost. He's kind of a spectral figure. Let me go through some Herne artwork. So he's hung on his oak, but then he, like I said, his ghost, to make up for his crimes, his ghost then becomes the guardian of the wood, and he leads the wild hunt. So it's a procession of dead animals and dead people and ghosts and other spectral figures. And it's terrifying, but he's perceived as protecting the woods and guarding it, much like we've talked about the Sidhe and Cernunnos and any sort of stagman symbolism. All those figures are always seen as guardians of the wood, not only avatars of green nature, but it's guardian also. That's where we get that male virility, that fierce warrior spirit, if you will. So here's a sexy Herne, if you will, or at least he must work out Herne. Oh, here's sexy Herne. That's him. That's the old one. This is great. Yeah, there you go. This is really more Cernunnos than Herne, but it's very overlapping mythology. So this one's called the Guardian, Herne the Hunter. So yeah, let me put this guy back on here. So Herne the Hunter, he guards the woods. He's a stag boy. He has the antlers. He also has a horn. He's frequently depicted with the horn, blowing the horn that is waking the dead spirits and leading the procession. So you've got the horn that wakes the sleepers, and also the idea of a guy with antlers, but also blows the horn. So you've got all versions of the horn symbolism. And of course, he's very horny as well. So you've got, I guess, all versions of the idea of having horns, being horny. So he's basically a undead version of the Green Man. He guards the forest, but he's a ghost. And it specifically comes out in the winter, months. So when we see Cold Hands riding around as a dead man guarding the haunted forest, doing Green Man stuff, and he's not wearing antlers. Instead, he's riding the elk, which has antlers, giant 10-foot wide rack of antlers. He's basically doing a Herne the Hunter impression. And Cold Hands, of course, covers his face and throat with a cloth, and his voice is all rattly and choked. So he probably had some sort of strangling or throat wound, which lines up with Herne being hung from the tree, Odin's hanging, and all that stuff. Now, the other clue about Herne the Hunter is comes from Sam Tarly, right? So the Tarleys live at Horn Hill. And when we're given the Garth the Green mythology in the World of Ice and Fire, we're told that besides his firstborn son, Garth Gardner I, there are 12 other notable children of Garth the Green, although one of those children is a set of twins. The set of twins, forget the twins. Let me just look this up. So so these are the twins. I'm right. Okay, so Herndon of the Horn and his twin brother Harlan the Hunter built their castle atop Horn Hill and took to wife the beautiful woods witch who dwelled there, sharing her favors for 100 years. The brothers did not age so long as they had intercourse with her whenever the moon was full. So Herne the Hunter, and then we've got these two people, Harlan the Hunter and Herndon of the Horn. And we've seen that Herne the Hunter has a horn. So George just took Herne the Hunter and split it out into a pair of twins. And these are the ancestors of House Tarly. So Sam is carrying all of this Herne the Hunter symbolism. And then, of course, he meets Cold Hands, who is Herne the Hunter. So it's very much George taking two ends of the same symbolism and having them meet up and shake hands. So Cold Hands is basically an embodiment of the mythology of Sam's ancestors. That's maybe the way to say it. And then, of course, like I said, we've got the witch figure, the moon goddess, who is sustaining their life, giving them longer life. That's just a version of the triple goddess resurrecting the horned god in the spring. So it's just a different version. And you could also say perhaps the woods witch is really the weirwood. And so these two horned figures were sustaining their longer than average lifespan through the weirwood by becoming green seers. That is possible. Cold Hands is sexy regardless. He's a strong man. He protects and provides for the children. That's a husband. All right, Devoted. Cool. So so that's Cold Hands and Herne the Hunter. So you can see like the Night's Watch. Not the Night's Watch. I'm sorry. The Starks and the King of Winter mythology. It's tied to Santa Claus in a couple ways. It's tied through the weirwood trees. It's tied through the title of the King of Winter. And then we go up north and we find Bloodraven and all of the Odin ideas, but that's really from the same body of winter mythology. So George has really been pretty creative here, mining all these different versions of winter mythology to populate his northern landscape. I've also pointed out that Jon Snow really just translates to Jack Frost, right? Jack is a nickname for Jon. Snow and Frost are basically the same thing. And Jack Frost, if Garth the Green is a personification of the green of nature, Jack Frost is simply a personification of the cold of winter. So Jon Snow, he's set up. That's the Cleo dust, the Cleodander. Jon Snow is set up to be a different kind of King of Winter instead of somebody who, well, I guess I shouldn't say instead of. If you look at the idea of the others or the idea of a Night's King or a King of the Others, this is just a different version of the Winter King idea, right? This is now like an absolute embodiment of the cold itself. That's Jack Frost. And that's essentially what we see with the others. So, as I pointed out, George giving Jon Snow the name Jon Snow foreshadows him being otherized or raised as a cold white for a few reasons. Not just the name, his name is Snow, but from the fact that Jack Frost is literally an embodiment of winter. And Jon Snow will be, of course, probably named King of the North, which is just the modern version of King of Winter. And after the others steal his body, if in fact they do, he'll probably be freed from that enchantment with fire magic, of course, making him a fire white, which will make him a King of Winter in the sort of Wicker Man tradition. So Jon's really got it. He's got it all covered, doesn't he? He's going to be every kind of Winter King. And if his hair goes white and his eyes go red so that he looks like his wolf ghost or like Bloodraven, he'll also look more like Santa as well. So there's that. Yes. So guys, I do have some other ideas kicking around in my head, but let me go ahead and open it up for questions. If you guys want to ask questions about winter mythology or really anything at all, we're hanging out here, having a good time. We're only an hour into the stream. So yeah, I can take it any direction you want to. So let me circle back to Patchface while I wait for some questions to roll in. Patchface, of course, he always says, I know, oh, right? Well, that is taken from something called the Devil's Bluster. And shout out to Ravenous Reader, who's the one who found this. I'm going to go back to my winter hat. So the Devil's Bluster. The devil used to be a frequent character in theater, okay, in the Middle Ages and Renaissance times and such. And frequently the devil was associated with this wild man of the woods idea. So think of Krampus, okay? Krampus looks like a really scary cross between Santa and like a horned god, right? And he steals the bad little children or punishes bad little children. There's a lot of versions of this. And in fact, the legend of Saint Nick, which of course has a heavy contribution to the idea of Santa Claus, jolly old Saint Nick. Saint Nicholas was a real saint. And the name Santa Claus or Sinterklaas, it means Saint Nick. So Nicholas, the Klus in Nicholas is the Klaus in Santa Claus. So Saint Claus, Saint Nicholas, that's where that name comes from. Now, Saint Nick, he was a real person, but mythology grew up around him, and that mythology then evolved. So when he was remembered with various festivals, frequently it would be a 1-2 combo. You'd have Saint Nick and you'd have the devil, but the devil would be some sort of Krampus-like green man. And it was basically a good cop, bad cop routine where Saint Nick rewards the good children with gifts. But if you're bad, you know, Krampus or the devil, he'll carry you off, right? So that tradition made its way into a lot of plays and theater, and the church was in charge of a lot of the theater that went on at the time. And so when the devil character would enter the stage, he would come in with something called the Devil's Bluster, where he would say, ho, 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 and sort of stroll in to the scene. That is why Santa says, ho, 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 because, of course, all of these Krampus, Green Man, Devil ideas, they grow out of the same Green Man and Winter King mythology that Santa does. And of course, the church was very afraid of any kind of shamanism, nature, religion, polytheism. So they were constantly trying to demonize those things if they weren't trying to adapt them, co-opt them. And so what we see with Saint Nick is essentially both things happening at once. Saint Nicholas himself is the purified version of the Winter King, and the devil is essentially all the stuff that they reject about this mythology. So it's a very clever thing that happened there. But George knows about this, obviously. And so Patchface, who is decked out in red and green, and he's got the antlers, and he's got all the shamanistic, craziness where he's got 1 foot in the dream realm and he's catching visions of things that haven't happened yet. He always comes on by saying, oh, that's his version of ho, 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 which is, like I said, either Santa's calling card or what's known as the devil's bluster. So pretty cool trivia there. Yeah, Patchface has the bells too. Yes, he does. And then when they go up north to the wall, he remakes his motley and his helmet, but this time he uses like beaver pelts and animal skins. So now Patchface actually looks a lot more like an actual shaman now that he's in A Dance with Dragons. Yeah, so, and if you're joining late and you missed the beginning of the stream, I got engaged. So you can say congratulations to me if you like. I am lucky enough to say that Minty Maelstrom will soon be my wife. Looking forward to that. Probably getting married next year. So we got engaged the day after the winter solstice. So yeah, all I want for Christmas is you. Shout out Mariah Carey and Quinn's Ideas. And devoted to Mariah and all other obsessive Mariah Carey fans out there. Yeah. So Barris Aurelius is chiming in to say that there were over 2,000 ecclesiastical dedications, churches, dedicated to Nicholas in France, Germany, and the Low Countries alone before the year 1500. So you can see Nicholas was a very important saint. And of course, he was associated with charitable gift giving. He supposedly paid the bride price for 3 women who would have had to become prostitutes otherwise. So it's kind of a dark cultural commentary on, women's role in society there, hidden inside the Saint Nick tale. But basically, Saint Nick paid the bride price for these women so they didn't have to marry or become sex slaves, essentially. So thanks, Saint Nick, feminist. Good job. Yeah, I guess. Champion, totally. Yeah, true story. Or true mythology, anyways. And then Saint Nick more generally is associated with gift giving and charity. So you can see how the origin of something in the Christmas tradition has multiple. There are multiple origins for like something like gift giving. It's like it goes back to shamanic mushroom giving, but also traditions about charity and stuff as well. So is there a Santa in Game of Thrones? Well, Patchface is probably the closest. Patchface and Bloodraven, I'd have to say. Thank you, PayPal from Shakti, my Instagram buddy. Thanks, man. Congrats. And from Casey, congrats and thank you. Quite welcome. So let's see here. What other Santa Claus mythology have I not talked about? Well, okay, so remember I talked about the Oak and the Holly King and how Holly King is associated a lot of times with ideas that go along with winter, like death, emaciation, animals like wolves and ravens. So we see the South-North dichotomy in A Song of Ice and Fire with this mythology. So in the South, we have the Garth the Green legends. Garth the Green is the Green Man, one for one. Same. I mean, it's all the stuff about Garth the Green is straight out of Green Man mythology. And George even says Garth the Green is similar to many agricultural deities found throughout the world. So he's basically almost breaking the fourth wall to say, here's my version of the Green Man, right? Now, up in the north, we have the King of Winter. We've also got the Barrow King, who's worshipped at Barrowton. The Barrow King is also associated with Garth because the Barrow King is said to be also the same thing as the mythical First King, who in the north is known as the First King of the First Men. Garth is also called the First King of the First Men. And this First King of the northern legend is also said to have led the first men across the Arm of Dorne, just as Garth is. So essentially, the people in the north at Barrowton believe that Garth the Green is buried in the Great Barrow Mound at Barrowton. So their hero is essentially dead Garth, just as the Stark King of Winter is like a dead green man. Remember, a green man made of all the dead shoots that survives through the winter and is burned in the spring. So in the South, we have the Garth legend, the Summer King stuff. Then we go to the North. It's not just the King of Winter, it's also the Barrow King. So, and now all of the Barrow culture, that's taken from Germanic culture. Ring forts also comes from Germanic culture. I was reading about this last night. So all that northern culture is basically a mismatch of Celtic and Germanic cultural stuff and folklore traditions. Skin changing, all the shamanistic green seeing stuff, the barrow mounds, the ring forts. Pretty cool. So Stannis. Stannis is obviously, he's got the stagman symbolism of Baratheon, but he's not a Summer King. There's nothing Summer King-like about Stannis. He's essentially what a Stark would look like if a Stark was a Baratheon. He is gaunt, emaciated, hard, mirthless. His stag is on fire, right? His stag sigil is surrounded by the burning heart. So this is a shout out to the King of Winter mythology, where you burn a Wicker King or a Green Man in the spring, and that is the King of Winter. And of course, Stannis, what does he do? He goes north and fights the winter. He fights the wildlings and gets ready. He's getting ready to fight the others. He bosses around the Night's Watch as if he was a Lord Commander. He emulates the Night King by taking his seat at the Night Fort. Then he goes to Winterfell to fight a battle in the snow. Not laughing all the way. Ha 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 ha. So he's essentially very much a winter king, horned god. He's got lots of shamanic symbolism. He's got the burning stagman symbolism. So yes, this is very much an overlapping with all of the other Winter King Stark ideas. And that is why he's up there fighting the others, or getting ready to fight the others, fighting the Boltons, who are like symbolic others as well. So once again, guys, if you have questions about literally anything, you can go ahead and fire it away, and I will go there. Oh, do I? Scrolling back. Must have been a while ago. Okay. Let me look at the doc. I'm being told I missed a super chat from earlier from Jenny. So in A Christmas Carol, the ghost of Christmas Present wears green and white, red hair, and gives Ebenezer Scrooge trippy stuff to drink. Yeah, so the ghost of Christmas Present, he looks the most like the Green Man in that he's vital, he's healthy, and he's celebratory, and he's reveling, right? Yeah, and I forget what he does give. What does he give Scrooge? I guess some wine or something, right? It's been a long time since I've seen that. But yeah, your Ghost of Christmas Present, he kind of gives you some vague Summer King vibes because he's the idea. So the idea of, let's talk about feasting, because this is a big part of it. The earliest, when we look at the Yule celebrations, let me get the right screen up here. Sorry, guys, I'm too many windows open. The crux of the Yule celebration is a feast, and most winter festivals, they have a feast. So the idea is that we are celebrating some amount of bounty even in the winter. So you've got to lay up, set aside things in the summer for this winter feast. It's also frequently we get the sacrifices, either sacrifices of animals, or sacrifices of plants and things, which are burnt as offerings. And in some Yule celebrations, they even take all the blood of the sacrificed animals and they stick some straw into the blood and they're going to dab it on all the walls and stuff, and then even sprinkle it on the people. And then they cook the meat. So it's very much a feast. It's sort of an FU to winter. It's saving a little bit of the summer bounty in the winter. It celebrates. It's kind of like the Jack and the Green idea. It's keying in on this idea that we're still have enough to live and start a new cycle, to start a new year, right? So this feast, this winter feast, we see it in A Song of Ice and Fire, but it's the Feast of the Dead, right? So it's these two scenes where we see dead Robb Stark, who is of course king in the north and therefore king of winter. We see him in undead form twice, and they're both Theon visions. No, one's a Theon vision and one's a Dany vision. Sorry. Dany, of course, sees a vision of the Red Wedding, where Robb has a wolf's head, sits at the head of a table of corpses, and he holds the mutton like a scepter. So this is Robb as a king of winter, presiding over a winter feast. But the twist is that everyone's dead. So this bodes ill. This is not a winter feast that signifies the bounty and the fact that we've preserved food. It represents the fact that Westeros is being caught on its ass as the long night approaches. There's been a bunch of war. The crops have been burned. People haven't set aside harvests, and winter is coming. So this corpse feast is indicating that. It's showing you the king of winter, Robb, he's dead, and his feast is of the dead. So there's a lot of things going on in that scene, but one of the elements is that winter feast. It's also a version of Passover with Jesus and the disciples, especially with the lamb, Jesus being the Lamb of God or whatever. But everyone's dead. And of course, the last hero and his 12, Jesus and the 12 disciples, probably all these ideas go back to the Zodiac, but that's a separate conversation. The other vision of the corpse feast with Robb is Theon's vision. So this time, instead of Robb at the head of the table, it's dead King Robert Baratheon, for whom Robb has been named. But Robb enters the feast at the end. The doors of Winterfell fly open, and Robb stalks in with Grey Wind at his side. They both got 100 wounds, and Grey Wind's eyes are burning, and the snowstorm is coming in with Robb. So he's very much a king of winter here with the snowstorm, right? And he's entering the feast. He's mad. It's because they had a winter feast without the king of winter. And he's like, hey, I'm here. I'm late, but I'm here. So it's cool. We see King Robert with a similar role to Robb, because Robert is a dead green man and King Robb is a king of winter who, again, is a dead green man in terms of folklore. So that's the winter feast and the king of winter. It's, of course, George gives us the dark, twisted version of it, but that's what those two feast scenes are shouting out to. Don's new printer says, could there be a direwolf versus dragon scene at the end? Merry belated 4:20 Mountain West time zone, my friend. No, so the dragons and the wolves will be working together, to fight the other. So I was highlighting in the War for the Dawn streams how helpful the wolves are when you're fighting the whites. And same thing with the dragons. Their main feature is the ability to breathe fire, catch all those flammable whites on fire. Now, if there's a whited dragon, perhaps, and I'm not sure, maybe that's what you were trying to type there. But yeah, though the wolves and the dragons will be mostly working together, just as Jon and Dany will be working together. At least that's my opinion. Robert Aaron. What's the question about Robert Aaron? Yeah, well, so Christmas, basically, as Europe became Christianized, all of the European folklore that was pre-existent was either co-opted by Christianity or demonized. They did a lot of co-opting. Co-opting works better. Best example is, well, the latest example of this is the Christianization of Norse mythology. You can see essentially the Christians showed up, right? And they've got this myth about this guy, Jesus, the Son of God, who's hung on a cross and dies, but then defeats death, conquers death, and then gives a gift of salvation, of eternal life to people. Oh, it's like, oh, it sounds a lot like Odin. He was hung on the tree, and then he saw the runes, and he gave the runes to the people and overcame death. And so they're like, yeah, Christ, yeah, we know him. We call him Odin, but same dude, right? So there was a compatibility there. And so when there's a compatibility, you see that get zipped up. That's why the birth of Christ is set to the December month, even though there's no evidence that if Jesus was a real person, that he was born in December. That's a completely mythical attribution. The thing is that process has been happening long before Christianity. When we talk about Norse folklore, Germanic folklore, Celtic folklore, we're sort of looking at it as a body. But the people that lived at that time, first of all, we're talking about different times and various groups. And so they would all have their local versions that would get zipped up into overarching deities over time. So there's a fluidity to all of this myth. And the co-opting, there's just layers and layers and layers of it. And that's why when you go back, like you drill down the Odin mythology and you find shamanism. And then you go all the way over to Russia and you drill down their Christmas mythology and you find shamanism. So a lot of it just goes back to the common Indo-European origins, to be honest. Welcome, Spike Spiegel, who's just become a squisher with the join button. Thank you very much. Enjoy your custom emojis and one free super chat per month. So as far as Robert and Aaron, well, his most of his symbolism is parallel to Bran. He sits on a weirwood throne, and he's a sickly boy. Bran sits on a weirwood throne, and he's a crippled boy, right? So Robb and Aaron drinks the milk of the poppy. Bran eats the weirwood paste. And then Robb and Aaron has the shaking sickness, but of course, seizures and schizophrenia were taken as signs that someone should be a shaman and has like an ear open to the spirit world in most ancient cultures. And ecstatic trances were often associated with seizures. So Robb and Aaron is basically a symbolic green seer, but he lives in a castle of ice. Mostly, I think this is clues about the others having an origin with the Weirwoods, but their part of the Weirwood network is severed from the regular Weirwood network, and that's why living Weirwoods won't grow in the Eyrie, but they have a bunch of dead Weirwood. Not only the Weirwood thrones, but the Weirwood moon door. And then it's all made of pale stone. The Weirwoods turn to pale stone. So you could see their castle as like a frozen dead Weirwood castle. And that's the idea there. So I'm not sure how that ties in to some of the stuff we were talking about. That's more a Song of Ice and Fire specific green seer symbolism, I would say. So let's see here. What other Christmas mythology did I want to talk about? I think I've hit most of it. Checking on you, chat. So like I said, if you have questions or things you want to prod me about, now would be the time. I don't think I'm going to do a super long stream today. I do think I'm going to stream on Wednesday. I've got an idea for what I want to do, but I'm not going to say it yet. Oh, is there another super chat? Let's see. From Brooke, who's a member. Thank you, Brooke. A 4-month member. Says, could you talk more about the triple goddess and how she plays into the Oak Holly King stuff? Is there a triple goddess in A Song of Ice and Fire? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So Melisandre is probably the best example, right? She's doing the resurrecting, or at least will be. She is obviously a witch. We found a witch. Maybe burn her. But she's also got, we talk about the triple goddess. So the triple goddess is a moon figure, right? Melisandre has the milk pale skin and is very much parallel to Night's Queen, who literally is compared to the moon. And of course, Melisandre has abundant other moon symbolism. Think about Daenerys. Okay, let's think about Drogo's burial or Drogo's pyre, right? Drogo's burned, but appears to rise from the fire, right? He is, Dany sees in the smoke, he sees Drogo mounted on a smoky stallion. And then she perceives him as ascending the smoke column to the stars, where then the red comet is perceived as Drogo in the sky. So Daenerys has essentially resurrected Drogo into a different form in that ceremony. It's also got a lot of parallels to the burning of the 7 on Dragonstone, which Melisandre presides over. Then we have the Weirwood itself, which is strongly associated with Nissa Nissa. So Lyanna, for example. Lyanna is a strong moon goddess figure. She's got the halo of blue winter roses, like a lunar. What's the glowing? Not the put. Corona. Thank you. Yes, I'm thirsty. I want a Corona right now. So Lyanna's a moon queen. She's also the May queen. The Rhaegar Slants thing is a version of the Maypole stuff. But Lyanna, she's associated with the tree because, of course, she becomes the Knight of the Laughing Tree with the Weirwood sigil shield and rides out to defend Howland Reed. So I'm not sure what really, it's not very specifically triple goddessy, but it does make her a moon goddess figure associated with the Weirwoods. And the Weirwoods are really where all the resurrection happens. Like the green zombies, they're going to be resurrected in front of the Weirwood trees. So the Weirwood tree itself is kind of like the triple goddess. And that's why we see in the Weirwood Goddess series that I did so many of the Nissa Nissa figures like Catelyn, Sansa, Daenerys, Melisandre, they wear the same coloring or symbolism as the Weirwood tree itself. And then, of course, I guess the most obvious answer is in the Faith of the Seven, George is using the Maid Mother Crone idea of the triple goddess, like right there on its face in the religion. So we know that George is sort of like hanging a lantern on it saying, hey, I know about the triple goddess mythology. And that goes hand in hand, of course, with Cernunnos and the horned god. And that means Thoros is a triple goddess, raising Beric from the dead, clearly. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, Kat goes from mother to crone and remembers her maidenhood a lot. Yeah, that's probably a good character to look at for that triple representation as well. Melisandre, I guess we could think about the same thing. She looks like a mother of darkness, mother of shadows. She looks like someone who's in the prime of her life, but she's actually much older than that and has all the wisdom of the crone. So she's kind of running those three stages as well. Yeah, so Amira's asking probably a question I think she knows the answer to. She looks like she's proud of me just to talk about it. But of course, the Ghost of Highheart and Lady Stoneheart. These are crone figures who are very much prophets and oracles. Obviously, Ghost of Highheart is the easy one, but even Lady Stoneheart, who lives inside the cave, whereas the Ghost of Highheart is above the cave. Lady Stoneheart, she's not necessarily foretelling, but she is controlling men's fates. She's decreeing who lives and dies. She's hanging people or letting them off. So she's basically acting as a judge and a psychopomp in that she's conducting souls to the afterlife. And the way that she does it by hanging people ties back into the shamanic Odin hanging ideas. So in a sense, you could see her as executing people, but you could also see her as essentially ushering people into the shamanic death cycle. So good question. Very good question. I always ask for tea and then forget about it. Oh, it's still warm. Good. Also, a bit of the crone mythology from A Song of Ice and Fire. The crone is spoken of as having opened the door of death and let the first raven into the world. So this is more a psychopomp thing. She controls the door of death. She sends people to their death, or she can open the door of death and let dead things back into the world. So, yeah. And yes, this is my dragon mug. So Merry Christmas, everyone. We've got 249 people watching. If you'd all be kind enough to click the like button, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. You could even go so far as to click your subscribe and make sure that notifications are set to all. And if you really, really want to do me a solid, when the stream is over, hit the refresh button on your browser, and that will take you to the completed page where you can leave a comment. So I always ask you guys to leave a comment on the way out. That's how you do it. When the stream is over, you click the refresh button on your browser tab, and that will take you to the screen where you can then leave a comment and tell me how much you loved the Christmas mythology stream. It's a very important thing to do. It helps jog the YouTube algorithm, and it makes me feel appreciated so that I keep doing this with vigor and gusto. And I didn't mention it, but of course, when Renly and Stannis have well, yeah, I've got a couple Baratheon things to mention. So Renly and Stannis kind of kill each other, right? First, Stannis sends a shadow baby assassin to kill Renly. So Renly is the green horned god. He's being sacrificed right as winter is coming on, just as Robert dies as the fall is coming. So it's a similar idea. Our two green men kings, they die around the same time as the fall is coming, as winter is coming. But then Renly is resurrected at the Battle of the Blackwater, where he doesn't kill Stannis, but he defeats Stannis. And we see it's actually Garland Tyrell wearing Renly's armor, but he's called Resurrected Renly, and he's leading a host of demons. There's one of the singers at the Purple Wedding sings a song about Renly's ride, how he rode into hell and asked the King of Hell for one more chance to see Marjorie. And so he rides back to the Battle of the Blackwater to win the battle and take one last glimpse of his queen that he couldn't have. And then he's back to the underworld. So, yeah, Renly's ghost, exactly. So we've got the idea of, again, the Holly King and the Oak King take turns achieving supremacy and defeating one another. So first Stannis defeats Renly, but then Renly comes back and defeats Stannis. So that's pretty cool. Very much like the wolf and the stag that have killed each other in that first Winterfell chapter in the north. Now, you may remember Robert's death. Robert's death came when he was hunting an animal. He was hunting first a white stag, which is a symbol of Cernunnos, by the way, the white stag, and Herne the Hunter. So Robert hunting a stag is a bad omen. It's like trying to kill yourself, essentially. It's his spirit avatar. He was trying to hunt it down. And so when you have a horned god leading a hunt, we should think of the wild hunt. And Robert's hunt shifts from the white stag to the boar. They hunt this black devil of a boar. The boar kills Robert, and Robert kills the boar. So it's a mutual assassination. It's very similar to the black shadow baby that comes from Stannis killing Green Renly. Robert is wearing hunting greens when he's killed by this black devil of a boar. So Robert dies leading the wild hunt. Then he asks for the boar to be served at the feast. So then we have the winter feast with the sacrificial animal, the boar. And you could even think about there's a parallel between Robert and the boar, because Robert is described as being like a boar. And he is boorish in the classic sort of drunken male sense, right? So the boar that's eaten at Robert's death feast, we can kind of imagine eating the green man, eating the sacrificed stag man, which is part of it. So that's another bit of cool wild hunt and green man folklore. It's all through Robert's story, including his death and even the feast after his death. Robert basically loves going hunting. That's his whole deal. So he's all about leading the hunt. And that's obviously, like I said, wild hunt stuff. In the drunken male sense. Yes, he's boorish. That's right. So we see Jack Frost, Jack in the Green, Father Christmas, Sinterklaas, Odin, Yule, Saint Nick. I think I've been most everywhere. We've got the Baratheons. We did Patchface, King of Winter. Yeah, I think I did. I think I pretty much did hit all the Christmas mythology going on. Yeah, I guess even the way, so the others steal children, right? That comes from the She, but it also does remind you of the whole Krampus idea about punishing or stealing bad children. It's probably a common link there if you go back far enough. So that's it. I'll go ahead and take last call for questions and then wrap it up. So I can go back to work on my Danny video, which I'm still trying to finish. It's going really well. Love how it's coming out. It's a very long video, so I'm still working on it relentlessly and furiously. Minty will tell you, I mean, I put in a full day's work yesterday on Christmas, to be honest, although we just kind of stayed home. We did our Christmas celebration last week, so it's not like I'm a humbug over here or anything. And we got engaged the day after the winter solstice, so that was kind of our big celebration. We watched The Matrix, which I thought was pretty good. Yeah, let me give my thoughts on The Matrix real quick, as well as Peter Stinklage's dumb comments. I got thoughts on that too. So The Matrix, I thought was pretty good. I thought it was essentially just a love story. It was no, I don't think I'm going to do a whole stream about The Matrix, but I did like essentially it was a love story is what they decided to go with. It's, you know, it's in the second and third movie, they were really going into a lot of world building and stuff, and the Animatrix is really good for filling out the world building. But this fourth movie, basically, it did a lot of fourth wall breaking, where it's asking questions about cinema itself and entertainment and things like that. And that's always been what The Matrix is about, of course. But at the heart of it essentially was somebody trying to work their way back to their lost love. And I thought that part of the story came across really well. That was the main part of the movie. So it's one of those things where I think people's expectations probably affects whether or not they liked it. And there were some moments that were kind of, I don't know, cheesy or fan servicey or whatever. That's the Wachowski's style. Like if you look at Sense8, the series that she did recently, pretty good, has a lot of good stuff going on, but does love those almost overly cutesy poetic moments. That's kind of just the style. But yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I thought casting was pretty good, and yeah, I like love stories, so I was into it. I thought it was sweet. Now, as for Peter Dinklage, well, some of you guys may have seen his comments, and he essentially said something like, people didn't like the ending, parentheses, the Danny John ending, because they wanted all the pretty white people to ride off happily into the sunset. Meaning, I guess he's saying, oh, that people wanted John and Danny to ride happily into the sunset. Those, I guess, are the pretty white people. But it was a weird take, considering that, of course, the few actors of color in the series, notably Missandei, were either killed off or essentially disgraced. Like Grey Worm is turned into basically a psycho, and then he stands around at the king ceremony where they name Bran the king, just being angry and getting essentially sidelined. And then Danny is the one character who's actually uniting a bunch of non-white people or non-Westerosi people under a single banner, liberating slaves, bringing them to Westeros. So then if you look at all the characters who got the happy ending, and this is like super basic analysis here, every Twitter response that I saw to Dinklage's comments made the same points, which is like, dude, no, all all the white people did get happy endings. Like all the Starks, Jon, Bran, Sansa, like they all got happy endings. So I don't know what Dinklage's deal is. If he just doesn't understand the story very well, or if he's trying to kiss HBO's ass, I have no idea. But pretty dumb comments, rightfully panned all over the internet. So I don't know. I don't really have anything groundbreaking to say about that, other than it was really dumb and disappointing. And it's worth noting that Emilia Clarke is the one actor that we know immersed themselves in the books and knows the book material very well and was constantly fighting for a kinder, more humane Dany character, whereas the directors were constantly trying to make her more imperious because they wanted to set up the shitty heel turn ending, of course. So good example of that is outside of Karth. On the show, Dany threatens to burn the city down and demands to be let in. In the books, she's invited in and doesn't make any threats. So it's a lot of moments like that. But yeah, Ghost had white privilege. Yeah, totally. So there's really not even a lot to say there. Just yeah, it's just disappointing. And of course, Tyrion's character was destroyed as much as anybody else. He's this sort of very intelligent, capable, and kind of sinister person through 4 seasons, similar to the books. And then when he goes darker in the books, the show starts whitewashing him, but also making him stupid to the point at the end, every decision he made was wrong in the last season. And of course, Book Tyrion would never be begging to spare Cersei's life or pleading with Cersei or looking at Cersei and be like, I know you're not a monster. Book Tyrion wants to kill Cersei. He wants to rape and kill his sister. He says it over and over. He hates Cersei. He hates the people of King's Landing. He would never plead for their mercy. So it's just pretty asinine to see the Tyrion actor like sticking up for the ending, but whatever. There's I said my piece. There it was. And of course, for all of my hot takes at the Dragon LML on Twitter, when I feel upset and want to type, I go to Twitter. That's where you can find that. So that's it, guys. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you very much. You guys have been great. Like I said, when I end the stream, if you want to give me a Christmas present, hit the refresh and leave a comment on the way out. That would be awesome. And I do plan on streaming this Wednesday, 3 p.m., subject to be announced, but I'm hoping to get a guest and to do something kind of cool. So stay tuned. Follow me, yes, on Twitter at the Dragon LML, Instagram at David Lightbringer. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a live stream. And a Merry Christmas to all of you. Ho, ho, ho. Oh, oh, oh.